So good afternoon. A lot of things happening all at once, so we'll talk about that in a few seconds, but we'll just give it a minute before we go live. I'm watching Netflix's return. They had their earnings today. They hit their numbers. Wow, they beat subscriber totals. That's huge. I can't imagine they stay up this high. So after the markets close, typically at 4 o'clock, there's a lot of companies report their earnings. Netflix is a big one today. Netflix is high anyway, but a lot of the streaming companies have been getting downgraded because there's so many streaming companies. So Disney, for example, is getting downgraded because how long can they keep up their revenue? However, I'll tell you what I just did. My thought process is Disney has a market that is kids and Marvel fans, right? For the most Star Wars, Marvel fans, those kind of fans. Netflix is a much larger market than that. So right after the bell, the Netflix jumped up to 660. So it closed about 647 in that ballpark, or 637, I'm sorry. It jumped up to 660. At 660, I shorted it. So my short average is 660, 15 cents. And it is down now to 650, 21. I might close out of this. And I'm going to, close out now. Oh, no, I don't want to close. I'm shorted it, so I want to buy it to cover. Oh, I messed this up. I'm now trading live. And we'll get going in just a second. After hours, you have to have a limit order. And now I'm out of it. So made $10 a share pretty quickly on Netflix. It overshot. It went too high. And okay, so here's the deal with these. We'll talk about this for a little bit. When it comes to streaming companies, the question is, when you're buying a stock, what will it do? I think Netflix is different than Disney, that Netflix reaches far more demographics. Disney reaches kids, obviously, and they reach the Marvel, Star Wars kind of crowd. Netflix reaches a far greater demographic, but doesn't necessarily go after kids. So I think their numbers will do better. And they have a show, Squid Game or Squid Rule or something like that, that's out now. That is like the #1 show in the world. Out of some Asian country. So I took a little bit of a risk, but when something jumps up that much, it jumped up like 15% real fast, that's always going to come back down. And so I made a quick trade after hours on that. So a few things to talk about. Obviously, the market. Obviously, what we should also say today is the first day. Good afternoon, Terrell. Today is the first day of online sports betting. So I have a bet in. And it's my first ever online bet. If you're bored, you can either see me lose or win. And I'm about to lose. No, we're on serve. Okay, so I bet my first bet ever, and this is free money. They gave it to me for free when I signed up for FanDuel. FanDuel is Mohegan Sun. DraftKings is Foxwoods. My bet was TFO. There's a tennis match between TFO, an American player, and Andy Murray. TFO is getting better and better and better. Andy Murray was a great player years ago, got some serious injuries, is on his way back. I bet TFO plus 1.5, which means he has to, in total amount of games played, he has to be within one game. The first set was a tiebreak, 7-6. TFO had 2 chances to serve for it, which would have helped me, but he didn't. He lost it, and he lost that set. The second set was a tiebreak, 7-6. He won that set, and we're in the third set on serve, 5-4 Murray. TFO is about to serve. So right now, if they stay on serve and hit a third set tiebreaker, TFO can win or lose, and I still win my bet. But it's nerve-wracking. It's a really, really close match. So it's an interesting first bet for the season. If you are looking to join FanDuel, remember when you're sports betting, it's a couple of things when you sign up. You have access to other sort of gambling too. And sports betting can be, if you're betting intelligently on games that you have some sort of advantage, that's great. If you're betting just to bet, that's not good. Don't do that. When you sign up for FanDuel, you can also get an account with Mohegan Sun where you're betting baccarat and blackjack and slots. Avoid that. That's not, when I trade stocks, I'm looking for opportunities where we have an advantage. When I sports bet, I'm looking for games. There's thousands of games. If you can find one where you have the advantage, don't bet just to bet. Don't bet just to say I'm betting. Don't bet to just have a level of excitement. If you're betting $20, that's one thing, but be careful. It's not something you can lose a lot of money really fast if you don't know what you're doing. And so if there are questions or tips on that, we can give you some. If I see a bet I like, have no problem mentioning it here on the podcast. Okay. It was sent to me a little while ago, and I want to talk about Colin Powell because, most people know I have a very religious upbringing and have left the religion. And when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, I left that religion, but I was not agnostic or atheist by that time. I had searched many, many different religions. And in doing so, I just got to know different belief structures and before I chose to just not be religious. But part of not believing in an afterlife is valuing life, valuing what we have now. And so my bias when I look at politicians, especially those in significant power, is I prefer those that avoid everything other than war. I don't want to see us go to war. I don't want to see the needless loss of life. So when Colin Powell passed away, yes, I have respect for him as a person, respect for him as a politician. Every indication, articles, researched articles from journalists I trust, movies, what have you, he was the voice of reason in the Bush administration. The exception to that was his presentation at the UN. And, from everything we've heard, I wasn't in the room. He had to be convinced to do that. It wasn't an easy thing to do. He took it seriously. But still, a lot of what he said led to the start of a war, which was not really necessary, and there were no weapons of mass destruction. So I have this kind of, yes, he should be honored. Yes, he gave so much to this country. He was a good man, a reasonable man, a moderate man, which I have a ton of respect for. At the same time, he helped lead to a war, which we never should have been in, and cost, let's be honest, hundreds of thousands of lives, because we're not just talking about American lives, we're talking about lives in general. That said, it was sent to me about an hour ago, and you just I'm conflicted on it. I understand the good things he did. I understand the spectacular career he had. I also understand this one big mess up in the middle. But if you haven't read this, I'm going to read it directly. It was sent to me. This is the former president of the United States of America, Donald Trump. Wonderful to see Colin Powell, who made big mistakes on Iraq and famously so-called weapons of mass destruction, be treated in death so beautifully by the fake news media. Hope that happens to me someday. He was a classic rhino, if even that, always being the first to attack other Republicans. He made plenty of mistakes, but anyway, may he rest in peace. What an asshole. Like, you can be conflicted, but what do you gain by being a massive jerk all the time? Just say nothing. You don't have to say a word. The guy's out of office. I remain confused. I understand why people voted for this man. I understand. I understand the dislike for Hillary Clinton. I understand the dislike of the political correctness that we're seeing grow now, and it's actually hurting the Democratic Party. I understand many of the reasons people said they wanted change. But there's a level of, you're just an asshole, that is hard to take. A man who gave his entire career for his country. And we can have all kinds of debates. I have serious issues with George Bush. It seems like over time, George Bush has gotten, a little higher, but he started wars and there was things. I have serious issues with George Bush. Never voted for the man, but his record, yes, he gave. But how do you bash a military general? If he was a general, I may have that wrong, but Colin Powell, whatever it was, his career, he was a classic rhino, and even that, always being the first to attack other Republicans. What the hell? are you even making a speech during a time like this for? And it is amazing the size of this man's ego and the fact that he's just a massive, massive asshole all the time. And sometimes Republicans kind of minimize it. It's like, oh, it's just mean tweets. No, it's not just, it's hurtful. It's purposely trying to hurt other people. There's nothing about this that shows pride in America or pride in our country or pride in people that put, military that puts it first. If you're a Republican and you're for the military, you have to be like cringing reading this nonsense that Trump is putting out. You have to be, because this guy was the military. And it's amazing that somebody ex-presidents go have peace, build your library, enjoy your life, enjoy your kids, enjoy your grandkids, whatever. Why do you have to be a professional asshole? Why? That's what I can't figure out. At the same time, and there's no direct comparison here, but at the same time, by the way, I just won my TFO bet. They have a third set tiebreak. So my bet on TFO was +1.5, which means he can lose the match, but total amount of games has to be +1. So in the first two sets, they were 13-13. They are now 19-19 in a tiebreaker. He can only lose by one. I won that bet. So I'm happy to say I won my first online sports bet in Connecticut. We get to this issue of an article written in the Register, which about Jamie Cosgrove, which amazingly didn't actually make any accusations. It said, Jamie says there's nothing wrong with the relationship between him having a tenant in a building who does work for the town. He doesn't make money from that company. They pay rent. Anybody can pay rent. And he's right. So in the article, they put a copy of the statute. There's nothing in the statute that would prohibit a elected official or official for the town having property, renting it out to somebody who may work for the town. There's nothing that does that. It goes worse when Kurt Schwanfelder, the town treasurer, a Democrat who is an enemy of Cosgrove, who is, attacked Cosgrove at every opportunity, comes out and says, I've been looking into this for a year, yet has continued paying the checks to that company. So clearly there's no issue. But yesterday, the Branford Democratic Party, which is quickly becoming Trump-like, which is quickly becoming the nasty inner city, large, Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven nastiness, and bringing it to Branford, sent out a disgusting email to the Democrats saying, exposed some massive GOP scam to take town money and funnel it to Cosgrove. And it was so nonsensical. It was so dishonest. And I know I can get fired up on this podcast, but I want to say this. 4 years ago, we had a campaign with Linda Mallow and Jack Ahern running against Jamie Cosgrove. And Jamie won fairly easily. The biggest attack from Jack Ahern and from Linda Mallow was that there weren't on enough public hearings for the senior center. That was the biggest attack. And there were a couple of seniors that didn't like what the senior center was. It was a small group. Most seniors love the senior center. It's a great building. It's done a great job, and it's phenomenal. And long-term saves a fortune for the town, no question. But their worst attack was there weren't enough issues for the senior center. They didn't allege crime. They didn't make up nonsense. They didn't say expose some GOP scheme. That wasn't it. Why? Because Jack Ahern's a Branford guy. And he may be critical, and you have to fudge stuff in elections. We get that. But they weren't attacking his character. They weren't alleging corruption with no evidence. Before that, you had the former principal Tisco, who really didn't attack at all. Before that, you had even Andy Campbell. You didn't have this kind of stuff. You had, I'm better than he is, or I don't like the things he said, or whatever it was. But it was never just vicious, nasty falsehoods. And the Democrats in Branford have chosen to choose as their chairman a young man from New Haven who serves on the Senate Democrats, who's just a political operative. His career is being nasty. His Twitter feed is just nasty. It's just anti-Republican. It's not standing for anything. It's just nasty. He's picked his team, and he's going to be disgusting about anybody who questions his team. I've covered Branford now for about 13 years. This is the first I'm seeing this. I didn't see this with DeRoss and Opie in their races. I didn't see this with Campbell and Cosgrove. I didn't see this with Rabinowitz and Cosgrove. I didn't see this with Malo and Cosgrove. There were claims made. They were questionable or maybe even not accurate, but no one came out and said corrupt and exposed, and there was a massive scheme to take tax dollars and put it. Jamie Cosgrove, by the way, has been in office for 8 years. His salary this year is the same it was in year one when he took office. He has refused raises every single year. Now, that's the average raise for town employees is 2%. Everybody else gets them. So we can compound that. $2,000 a year, $2,000, add that $2,000 the first year, $4,000, $6,000, $8,000. And I think at the end of the day, it comes to like $70,000, $75,000 that Cosgrove has walked away from by not taking raises. And now you're putting out emails saying exposed, there's a GOP scheme to get contractors to get money to Cosgrove. What planet are you on? Are you kidding me in Brantford? You're bringing that shit to Brantford? And you picked as a Democratic Party a kid who simply doesn't know anything about the town and doesn't care about the town. Because the only thing he cares about is getting up on November 3rd and saying, I knocked off the better candidate in the Republican because I don't give a damn about the town. That's the only thing he cares about. On the Republican side, you have Cosgrove, you have Ingraham, you have people who are leading the party who are lifelong Brantford residents. Don't go down that road. That's not something you do in Brantford. The Democrats have a decision to make. And it goes beyond this election. It goes beyond what we're seeing right now. Are you going to allow political operatives to come in and make Brantford New Haven? And make Brantford the Trumpian politics that we've seen on a national level? Because so far, both parties have avoided that. There's issues in the Democratic Party, but so far, every candidate running, Linda Malo didn't make those kind of accusations. Jack Ahern certainly didn't make those kind of accusations. And so you're telling me there's some massive corruption scheme, despite no evidence of it, despite nothing being against the charter, that you're sending out to your members to deceive your members. And by the way, when you do that, not only are you slandering an elected official in Jamie Cosgrove and an entire political party, you're also slandering the other business owner who has worked and contracted with the town for 15, 18 years, who has cut town grass for 15, 18 years. You're slandering them. For 10, 12, whatever how many years that person has had contracts with the town and been the low bidder, I think 2, he's been a tenant in one of the Cosgrove's buildings. And not even Jamie. Jamie's part owner of the family building that they've owned for generations. They're just a tenant. And this kid, Kevin Coughlin, comes to town, is elected the leader of the Democratic Party, despite knowing nothing about Brantford, and makes it disgusting. Jamie Cosgrove, whether you like him or not, I haven't heard him say a bad word about anybody publicly. I haven't seen any nasty mailers. I haven't seen any, how is he a kid? First of all, Michael Hunter, you're here again. You're a fake account. Get lost. He's a kid. Been here 2 years, know nothing about Brantford. He has the equivalent of 2 years of a 2-year-old knowing Brantford. So get lost. These fake accounts. But when has Cosgrove ever done anything like that? All he's done is build a senior center, get a Walsh school built, start working on fields, get more trails built, get more open space. Democrats that are liberal Democrats, all on his page because of what he's doing with the environment, solar farms. He's done a lot of great things for Brantford. Like him or not. You're going to allege corruption now? He gives up $70,000 in salary? Over the time he's been in office, never takes a raise, and now he's funneling money through whatever? What planet are you on? To the Democratic Party, grow up. Decide what you want Brantford to be, but decide now. Decide now by looking at the leader of your party, the guy who's leading this disgusting nonsense. This dishonesty, claims of corruption with nothing. I'm a political operative. Everything I say is on camera, as open as it gets. I know Michael Hunter's a fake person. He's probably somebody from Indian Neck, and we get that. Or he's a vocal person at the Board of Ed meeting. It's like one of three people. We get that. I'm a political operative. I'm right here. Everything I say is public. There's nothing behind the scenes. You can ask me questions in real time. How more transparent do you want me to get? I'm a registered Democrat. A year ago, I was on this podcast and I endorsed every single Democrat for office a year ago. I was so hard on a Republican, he sued me. Then he ran away and removed his lawsuit when he found out he was going to get destroyed. That's how hard it was on a Republican last year who was running for state office. What political operative am I? Every year this happens. If I endorse Jamie, I'm for the Republicans. If I endorse Robin Comey, I'm for the Democrats. If I endorse Scanlon, I'm for the... Give me a break. It's all nonsense. It's as open as it can get. I know all the candidates. And I've never seen a race where the Democratic Party or Republican Party puts out exposed corruption, and there's some massive scheme to take money to the Cosgroves, by the way. They're okay. They're doing all right. I don't think they're broke. He's trying to get funnel, what, a couple $1,000s? Give me a break. Give us all a break. And it's not, listen, I don't think personally Tom Brockett's a bad guy. I don't. Here's what happens. You decide to run for office. You retire, you want something to do, and you always said at the end of your retirement you wanted to run for office. I don't think he's a bad guy. But you can't get in office unless you win. And then so you, in your mind, you start saying to yourself, it's okay to slander somebody else. It's okay to be dishonest. It's okay to fudge the facts. It's okay to mislead people because I'm going to be the better person in office. So it's okay to do that. And you have this kid running your campaign, this 35-year-old person running your campaign, who has no problem lying and stealing or saying whatever he has to say to win because he doesn't even care about the town. He cares about getting that feather in his cap. In the meantime, the rest of us who have been here for a while, who we know all the players, we know all the people. No, we don't do that in Brantford. We don't allege corruption in Brantford unless there's serious corruption. You have some documentation that shows any of this? I read the Register article without a question. I read the Register article. It makes no accusations. The only person who made an accusation was Brockett. And I know what happened. The writer called him up. I do know what happened. This writer started this article 2.5 months ago. He told people he was told by his editors to do this. He came and talked to town employees, and then he waited 3 weeks before the election to write it. I don't even think they put it in the paper. They only put it online. And it doesn't say anything. Period. There's nothing anywhere in the charter that stops any elected official from having a tenant who does work for the town. Period. He's not an officer of the company, doesn't own the company, has nothing to do with the company. The company he does have something to do with, Evergreen, doesn't do any work for the town. Also, not against the charter. If you have something that you claim is a legitimate issue against the charter, file an ethics complaint. Now, there's a financial penalty for a false claim, so be careful. But Schwanfelder said in the article he's been looking into it for a year. He hasn't filed anything. I see no evidence of any filing whatsoever, no accusation whatsoever until 3 weeks before the election. This is a level that we have not seen in Brantford. It's dishonest and it's disgusting. That's what it is. And I've covered all the other races. I've moderated debates in past races. And I've not seen this. Ever. And we're getting close to the shit we're seeing in Guilford, which is just disgusting. On both sides. It's just all out slander. Everybody's a racist. Call everybody names. Disgusting. Outside groups pouring money in. It's just really messed up in Guilford right now. And there's no race for first selectman. Matt Hoey is unopposed. He's a good man. He should win unopposed. But that's what we're getting. We're getting that in Brantford for the first time in the years that I've covered news here. We're getting that. It's unbelievable. I did say I would talk about the town clerk race, because the one race I really haven't talked about is that we talked about tax collector. Obviously, we've talked about Schwanfelder a few times with treasurer, and obviously first selectman. When it comes to the town clerk, I have nothing negative to say about either one of the candidates. I know Lisa, not well, but I know her. She's done a fine job as town clerk. The opponent, Cimino, seems like a very nice, decent human being. People I know that know her speak highly of her. So there's nothing negative to say. I have always said that I don't believe these seats should be elected. And I don't believe in removing them from office unless there's a bona fide reason to do so, like we have, for example, in the tax collector's office. That said, I'll say this. Here's the problem with this being elected. And it comes to the fore in this election because you have somebody running. So Lisa Arpin's been there 8 years. Cimino was hired by Arpin and the HR director, I guess, at the time, 6 years ago. Arpin is the department head who grooms her and trains her and makes her an assistant clerk and gets her certified and then has her run against her. That's tough. Like, that's not, feels ugly. It's not fun. Little bit icky, but legal. Like, you have a right to do it. But the person who hired you and then trained you and then got you certified and further your career, then suddenly saying, I'm going to run against you is a little bit, all right, whatever. But here's the real question. If you're a town clerk or a tax collector in Brantford and you're elected, why would you ever hire another resident of Brantford? Like, you can hire people from Guilford and East Haven who you can train, you can get certified, and you can groom, knowing they will never run against you. So as you made them qualified for the seat, they don't live in Brantford, so they're not going to run against you. I can't figure out why anybody who's a tax collector or a town clerk who's hiring any staff going forward would ever hire again somebody in Brantford. Because you're literally training the person who's going to run against you because they're elected seats. It makes no sense. Now, for Brantford residents, it's the better thing to do because you want someone there who understands the town and knows how to get around the town and knows the history of the town. But politically and for your own career, it's a stupid mistake to make. So I give Lisa Arpin credit for putting the town first and hiring Cimino, who is a town resident and apparently was raised here and knows it well. But she actually, in hiring that person, instead of hiring somebody from East Haven or North Brantford or Guilford, and then pushing that person and training that person and getting that person certified, has trained and pushed and bettered the person who is now looking to take her seat. And then you have this simple point. If you vote for Lisa Arpin, both Cimino and Arpin keep their jobs. If you vote for Cimino, one person loses their job. It's a really weird circumstance. And yes, I will suggest you vote for Arpin because I don't think these should be elected anyway. So the person who's in there should be in there. That said, and Arpin didn't knock out somebody who wanted to be there. Miriam Kelly was the previous town clerk. She chose not to run. The Democrats kind of got on her. So she got it in an open election, and she's been there, and she's fine. And if she wins, Cimino is still employed there, and she also keeps her job. So I'd rather the situation where everybody keeps their job, and we don't make this overly political. That said, this opens the interesting door of if you are a tax collector elected, or an elected town clerk, why would you ever hire somebody who's a Brantford resident? It makes no sense. And that's why these seats should not be elected. They should be appointed. They should be hired based on qualifications. And now the tax collector we can change without a charter change from what I'm seeing. The town clerk would require a charter revision. That's a much more difficult process. But this opens up a door that should never be opened. And so, yes, I'll endorse Arpin, and that's not a knock on Cimino in any way. I have not heard negative things about Cimino. So I don't want this is not the tax collector issue where we have wrongdoing happening, potential alleged wrongdoing happening. This is a situation where she might be very qualified, but she's qualified because there's a person who hired her and helped her become qualified. And the only reason she can run for office is because she's a Brantford resident. That puts elected officials like tax collectors and town clerks in very, very awkward situations when it comes to hiring in the past and going forward in the future. Interesting thing to think about. But I am hoping Lisa wins because I hope both of them keep their jobs. There's no reason for either one of them to not have employment come November 3rd. Okay, that's it for today. Tomorrow we will have a candidate for Board of Ed, Neil Sullivan, on. It's kind of the same questions and discussion points that we've had for the last, for all the other candidates. And then probably Thursday or next week, I'll give my initial opinions and thoughts on the Board of Ed candidates. If you want to hear them, you're welcome to log in for those. But I'll also tell you what my criteria is, and it may be different than yours. So who you vote for, and I won't tell you who to vote for, but I'll tell you what my criteria is when looking at Board of Ed candidates. What do I want to see from them? What thought process do I want to see from them? How do they approach issues? And we'll talk about that in a little more detail after we get past the final interview. Okay, that's it for today. I appreciate you all joining me. Hopefully you have an amazing night. It's beautiful outside. So we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And I hope you have a great night. I'll talk to you soon.